Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast where one of the host's favorite Washington commander is the one who bit all those Secret Service agents. That's Lenny. I did that intro because we're in D.C. I'm in D.C. You guys are always in D.C. Domonique Foxworth, people know very well from the show, although it has been a minute.
Yes.
You know,
I'm not an off-season type of guy. You trot me out in the regular season, playoffs, and Super Bowl. Off-season, you tuck me in the closet somewhere.
You're a gamer. I would say that means something, but I don't want the people who come on in the off season to think that it means something in the other way. And then Charlie Kravitz, who works behind the scenes, although I guess listeners of Domonique's show know you, and helps me out with a lot of things, including youtube.com/@MinaKime. Subscribe if you don't already. Charlie, welcome to your first time on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm pumped. Long-time listener. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube. A lot of great stuff there.
Guys, this is the off season. And what that means, as it does every year with the Mina Kime Show, is that we'll be doing rankings, projecting top 10 offenses and defenses, quarterback draft, as always, X factors. We're going to talk about all the teams, and then, of course, do the divisions. But I thought this would be a good time to just take a breather, answer some reader questions, which is a good way, I find, of getting to teams that I have sort of neglected, shall we say, during the offseason thus far, particularly with the draft, maybe teams that aren't picking near the top of the draft and don't get talked about as much. So I chose a bunch of questions from Twitter, and many of them hit on those teams. Are you guys ready to get started?
Ready to rock.
Let's do it.
Okay. The first question I chose is about the Baltimore Ravens. Or actually, two questions. I got two questions about the Baltimore Ravens. Haven't really gotten to them that much. It was announced today, by the way, we're recording on Monday, that the opener, I believe, is Chiefs-Ravens, which is a banger. Always is, yeah. Are you guys big schedule release guys?
No, I'm not a big schedule release guy.
I didn't know the schedule had been released.
We're steeped in basketball right now. We're steeped in basketball playoffs.
By the way, if you guys are big NBA fans, you should definitely check out Domonique's show. They've been doing excellent NBA pods together. The eventification of the schedule release is pretty bad. Like it's pretty over the top on the part of the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive though.
Yeah.
Like I have to. I acknowledge that we're sickos for being into it, but it's impressive that they've turned all these things, like they've turned the combine into something we care about. They've turned the draft into something we care about. Yeah. They turned the schedule release into something we care about. The only thing about schedule release that I appreciate is sometimes we get a Mina Kimes cartoon. That was the best.
Oh, yeah?
You don't remember?
Chargers, yeah 2 years in a row. We'll see if I make it again this year. It's big. Yeah. I do like the team videos. Mm-hmm. But it's like we already know who the opponents are. So really all you're learning is, when the buys are, when the big matchups are, when the Christmas games and what those are and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk about the Ravens. All right. Two questions about the Ravens. One from Dat Kid Ahmed, who said simply, what do you make of the Ravens offseason? Katie Santander, who I'm guessing is also a Ravens fan, asked, I'm curious about Domonique's opinion regarding the Ravens coaching staff turnover this offseason. Are they a product of culture or system, vice versa?
Oh, they're speaking my language.
I know. Katie, she knows what Domonique likes.
She knows what I like.
These are kind of together. So I do want to get to the coaching stuff because it's such a massive question mark hanging over the Ravens and a big part of their offseason. But just to real quickly kind of revisit what happened offensively, pretty similar. Not a ton of changes. You lose a lot of the offensive line. 3 starters. You draft Roger Rosengarten out of UW. Ronnie Stanley gets, I think, a contract extension. Interior is sort of some questions. Makari is still a swing tackle. Wide receiver group, again, similar. OBJ's out. They drafted Tez Walker. Interesting. Bring back Rashad Bateman. Running back room is where the big changes because Derrick Henry's in. Edwards and Dobbins are out. So before we get to the defense, which is where really the coaching stuff is, so we can kind of put a pin in that whole conversation. Offensively, do you feel like the Ravens did enough this offseason? Are you worried at all? Are you optimistic? Like, how do you feel generally?
Yeah, I feel good about the Ravens offensively. I mean, it's a pretty safe thing to say every offseason is the Ravens did a good job. Yeah. Like, I can't remember the last time we were like, hey, Ravens really messed up this offseason. But we have to appreciate that there are going to be losses on every team. And if you lose players in positions that are less serious or less integral, if you think about the hierarchy, like interior offensive line, is a place where we feel like you can kind of make up some differences. I know sometimes the center and people talk about calling out blitzes and all that stuff, but like you don't want to lose your tackles. You don't want to lose your reliable receivers, obviously the quarterback. Running back is normally interchangeable, but I think if that's the place where they have the most turnover, that's something that you can compensate for and hide. But also I think the way that their offense evolved last year, it speaks to how good they are, and I think they'll continue to build on that. So like there's nothing on this that gives me big alarm bells, and this is a consistently well-prepared and well-coached team. I'm not concerned about the Ravens offense at all.
What do you think?
There's someone I'm kind of excited about from the Ravens draft class, and that's their 5th round pick running back, Rasheen Ali.
Okay.
Explosive player, but the thing is we've seen this, like, okay, I think everyone's expecting Derrick Henry because he's a complete outlier to continue being Derrick Henry now in a better system. But Ravens running backs go down every year, and you see an explosive young back be incredible in fantasy. And I know that this is not a fantasy podcast, but Rasheen Ali is someone who ran a 4.4, and you could see him in week 11, week 12 being sort of a league-winning running back type of guy that you could pick up.
I think you're absolutely right. And then, of course, Keaton Mitchell, who is the lightning to Derrick Rundy. Wow, Derrick. I started saying Thunder before I finished Derrick Henry and the Derrick Hundy. Okay, so he is the lightning to Derrick Henry's thunder, but he is coming off of the ACL, so we don't know exactly when he'll be ready. So I think it was a smart draft pick on their part. I mean, in the draft, they hit all the positions that they needed to. We'll get to the cornerback they took. I'm with you, Domonique, in that I'm not terribly worried about the offense despite the loss of the offensive lineman for a couple of reasons. Well, actually, there's a few reasons. One, Mark Andrews is way more important than losing like OBJ. No offense to OBJ.
Yeah.
I mean, he's literally was the only reliable player on this offense for years. He goes down for the playoffs. Weirdly, they don't miss a beat without him. So you have the ascent of Isaiah Likely, who was his backup tight end. Now you have Andrews coming back. We'll see how he is. I think should be fine. That position, you don't really worry as much. And then I do think Henry's going to be amazing in this offense, which is obviously a significantly better situation, even with the offensive line turnover. Getting to play running back next to Lamar Jackson is basically paradise for backs. And then the final thing that I think makes me optimistic about them is, Dominique, you alluded to this, it was an offensive overhaul. Yeah. So it kind of took a second with Todd Monken. Now they're in year 2. It's not an entire offseason where they have to figure things out. And something that I thought was a really heartening watching them that I think that they can continue building on is just how unbelievably efficient the play action pass attack was last season, which is kind of what we expected with Monken. But Lamar was second in QBR with play action, and they ran it a fair amount, but I think they could run it more, especially when you consider that when they were in, we were like, oh, they've got OBJ, now they're going to be in 11 personnel, and they did use more 11 personnel for sure. But when they were in their heavier groupings, and when they passed out of those groupings, so a lot of times play action, 12 personnel, 0.57 EPA per play when they passed, which is unbelievable. It's the best in the NFL. 21 personnel, which is significant, by the way, because the Dolphins and the Niners use it so much, along with the Ravens. So you're going up against offenses that use it a lot and are very prolific. Still, first in EPA per play when they passed out of 21, more than the Dolphins and the Niners. Crazy. So I feel like we saw sort of, okay, now they're really, really tying the run and the pass together. This passing attack is finally caught up to the rushing attack. Year 2 of that, I feel like, is going to be even better.
Yeah. Is there any trepidation about overhyping the Derrick Henry situation? Like, I'm excited about it too.
Yeah.
But he's got to age eventually, right? Like, it has to happen.
I think just he could be like 80% or 70% of who he's been, but because the situation is so much better, we're kind of expecting that to counter it. I also think they don't need Derrick Henry to be amazing in this offense. It's
also kind of fun when teams like double down on their identity. Like we saw the Ravens sort of lose their way a tiny bit in that Chiefs game and seem incredibly frustrated identity. And it's nice, frustrated in that game. It's nice to see them like going to the offseason like, nah, we're actually just going to ram it down your throat and be more physical than you on both sides of the ball.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think just having don't you feel like this is maybe, I don't know, it's maybe not the right way to think about football, but don't you feel like if they had Derrick Henry, they would have.
Yeah. Not even
because he's a better runner, but because he's Derrick Henry. They would have given him the rock.
You won't forget that guy.
Yes.
He's like 6'3", 280, standing right next to you. You will not forget to hand him the ball at some point in the game.
It is funny because, like, we nerds will be like, brr, the numbers show you don't have to have a good running back to be good at play action. But when you listen to NFL players talk about Derrick Henry every time he's on the field, just the level of attention and respect is notable. So again, that should help the play action passing attack. Okay, defense is where I think we can actually, there's some legitimate concerns. And this cuts to Katie's question because significant changes, not just Mike McDonald out, a defensive coordinator, to become the head coach of the Seahawks, but they lose Anthony Weaver as well, who some people thought might be their defensive coordinator. Denard Wilson goes to the Titans. So Zach Orr, who, God, I remember when he was playing, is now defensive coordinator of the Ravens. You also lose Patrick Queen.
Clowney.
Van Noy came back. And then Geno Stone, at safety. So they got rid of players at positions where they finally felt they were rich, right? Are you worried about the coaching aspect of this, though?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. And you mentioned Denard Wilson. He's a college teammate of mine. So I've known him and followed his career more closely than I followed just about any other coach's career. And he's been someone who's been waiting in the wings at a lot of different places to become a defensive coordinator. And I had assumed, we all kind of assumed Mike McDonald was going to get the job. And I was like, all right, Day-Day's going to get his shot right here, close to home. He went to DeMatha. He's from his area. And then he's gone. And to go all the way down the coaching tree, it really puts a lot of pressure on the decision maker. It's someone who's not prepared. I can't say not prepared, but I have to assume that the Ravens did not come into last season. Or they came into last season knowing that they might lose McDonald. And I don't think that they thought, you know what, our backup's going to be is Orr. So, I think that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. And then with the changeover and some of the positions that they've had, I think the defense is a bit more of a concern. But again, this is an organization that seems to be kind of well-run and supports their players and coaches pretty well. So even if they aren't as good as they could have been, it won't be a dramatic fall-off.
What do you think?
My opinion on this is really shaped by the Eagles last year.
Okay.
Where coordinators matter.
Yeah.
And we saw them lose their coordinators and it seemed completely different. But the counter to that is, all right, so you remember a couple years ago when Patrick Queen went from being someone who we thought was unplayable to being awesome? And it wasn't at the time, it wasn't like, oh, this is because of Mike McDonald. It was because of Roquan Smith.
Right.
And we felt that he was the skeleton key to the defense. And I think we're going to learn a lot to see how much of that was scheme and how much of it is just having someone who's a complete game wrecker in the middle that makes everyone's responsibilities easier.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the answer is probably both. And so they'll probably split the difference a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think it's notable that the players that they've lost, well, at least Stone, I think he's a really good player, and I love that signing for the Bengals. But he played with arguably the best safety duo in the NFL, right? In terms of Hamilton and Williams, and then similarly, again, Queen played next to Roquan Smith. So the thinking is next man up. Trent Simpson, who's I think second year now at this point. Okay, yes, it sucks, but because you're so strong up the spine, and keeping Madubuike was huge, by the way, because I don't think that would have been the one where if they had lost him, I would have been like, oh, you feel really good about their depth, even though I like the tackles that they have, Pierce and Washington and Travis Jones. He to me was the one player you couldn't afford to lose. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like they chose correctly. Yeah. Now, a lot of this will depend also on whether Nate Wiggins, who's the cornerback they drafted in the first round, pans out. Dominique, did you watch him much? We haven't really talked about him.
I took time to watch the corners, and I love him in part because he's small.
He also is crazy.
Yeah.
He
aggressive.
The ratio of size to aggression is my favorite ratio.
Yeah, he's a Mighty Mouse type of guy, and I appreciate that about him. As you know, I've been a bit hesitant to make strong draft projections because I've looked back at all my draft projections and be like, hey, sometimes I'm right. I'm really wrong. And sometimes I'm right for the wrong reasons. Yeah, Jeff Okudah's really burned me. I've been scarred by the Jeff.
Not over.
Oh,
he could still.
D'Amico.
This is D'Amico's greatest challenge.
If he get him right, then I will be more confident. So I don't want to say that I know he's going to be good, but I think he has the ability and he's in the system and the situation where they're going to support him. One thing that I think about the team, like you mentioned, thinking about their offense and their defense, it's clear that the Ravens understand what they want to do, and they haven't lost any of the structural pieces, like any of the foundational pieces that you think you need to have to keep this team on the field. Off the field is a different story. I think the coaching staff turnover on defense is harder. But sometimes I think about organization or a team as kind of like a body or an immune system. And through the course of the season, there are certain areas that are going to need more attention. And it's going to take away the ability for them to fight or prepare in other areas. And I think that's the concerning thing for me about this team, is that the defense is going to require a lot more of the intellectual resources and the effort of the team. I'm not sure what that's going to take away from. And I guess this falls all back on the quarterback and Lamar Jackson. Is at a certain point, lots of great quarterbacks get to the point where the offense is theirs. Mm-hmm. And they kind of move into that situation where they are coaching, they're running the offense, and it takes pressure off the staff. So I think while we managed to have a whole Ravens conversation without mentioning Lamar Jackson's name, which is mind-blowing to me, I think it still matters. His ability to take more and more responsibility, be more and more efficient, and all that stuff takes pressure off of the rest of the team, and particularly the defense.
I think that one point in favor of the defense is, we already said his name, but Roquan Smith. I remember when Dan Orlovsky, of course on NFL Live, when they called their game, they have meetings with some of the players, and he was like, this is his team. He didn't mean like it wasn't Lamar's team, the defense, but he is the Lamar Jackson of the defense now. Like, not just from obviously the abilities, which we've been talking about and we see on the field, and there's a reason why him and Fred Warner are like clearly 1-2 in the NFL right now, but I think from a leadership standpoint, it sounds like all of the players now look to him correctly. So the fact that they are able to retain him and that trade continues to
outstanding trade, and it's something that you and I have a conversation that we flirt with all the time, is the importance of interior linebackers. Is something that we thought was irrelevant for so long, or less than relevant, but it seems like it's more than relevant because that's a spot where people attack, and also it's a traditional leadership position on the team, and the Ravens fans know that for
it's so crazy because I'm still like, there's so many linebackers I wouldn't pay a lot of money, but Smith and Warner, I'd argue, deserve more money than like it's
like
just,
Christian McCaffrey.
Exactly. They're like the Christian McCaffreys of defense.
This is like one of the things I find most interesting about NFL team building is when positions become so undervalued that like you're paying Saquon Barkley the same as the 16th best tight end in the NFL. And you really have to look in the mirror and be like, oh, this guy's awesome at football. Like, shouldn't we want him on our team?
Well, that brings us to the next question, and the team that did not feel that they had to hold on to them, the New York Giants, a team I haven't really talked about. We have two questions on them. One from longtime listener Anastasia Williams, who says, how concerned should I be if my Giants have another bad season? Will they be looking for a new GM and coach? Are their seats a little warm? And then someone named Steamboat Chair Shots, which I really hope is not a porn thing, asks, how long do the Giants stick with Daniel Jones if he struggles early? So these questions are kind of related. Let's start with the Jones side of it. It's funny because when right after the draft, I think Brett Coleman and I got into this, which is like, we spent so much time talking about the Penix of it all, and the Falcons' decision that and like, okay, well, double down on quarterback, and you never know. The flip side of that is, if you agree at all with what the Falcons did, you have to be horrified with the Giants passing on a quarterback. Very different idea about team building. Let's build the team better, figure out quarterback later. Maybe it just reflected how they felt about the quarterbacks available after the first three. But they made the decision to stick with Daniel Jones. Now Drew Lock is his backup. It has been, quote, conveyed to him that Daniel Jones is a starter. But there's still a ton of smoke around the fact that he signed there because he felt he might get a chance. And so just starting there, I think, with the Jones, his contract is guaranteed for this year. Next year, only 12. He has $30 million next year, not 2024, 2025. $12 million of that is guaranteed if he's on the roster that year. But it's pretty easy to move on from him unless he gets injured. And
Ding,
then
ding,
the $23 million of that $30 million salary kicks in with a major injury, which, of course, is why the Broncos flirted with benching Russell Wilson. We saw this happen with Derek Carr in New Orleans. This would not be unprecedented if the team is not competitive at some point this season to say, screw it, Daniel Jones, we're benching you. We're playing Drew Lock. How would you guys approach the quarterback position if you were the Giants?
So you set it up really well. I don't necessarily agree that you can approve of the Falcons' decision, that if you approve of the Falcons' decision, that you disapprove of the Giants' decision, in part because the situation that they're in, the quarterback you just mentioned. So, like, I generally approve of, like, a slower build the situation, then add the quarterback because you'll get the best version of that quarterback. But they're in a situation where they neither want him to play well or to get injured. It's a weird spot because if he plays too well, they'll be back where they were a few years ago where they're paying a guy, they're going to have to extend the guy that they don't want to extend. If he gets injured, then they're stuck with a guy that they don't really want to pay, which, I mean, you mentioned the guarantee in that situation is not debilitating, but that's still the point. So I don't think that Daniel Jones is the long-term answer there. To the first question, be patient. You're going to have another bad season. Anastasia, like, it's gonna be bad. You gotta find the things that are in this situation that make you happy that you can build on. Maybe Drew Lock will turn into something. I also think that Brian Daboll, asking how hot the seats are, we don't know how good Brian Daboll is as a football coach.
Mm-hmm.
Coach of the year.
Yeah, okay. We give him a lot of credit because of Josh Allen, and that's really his calling card.
Well, year one with Jones.
Right.
I think there's a question, did Daboll work a miracle making that offense as efficient as it was? So I think that's why he won Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you agree with it, yeah.
No, I get it. I'm not saying, I don't want to argue whether he should have been Coach of the Year or not. I would say that season is not enough for me to think, we got the answer. Yeah. So I do like that Shane is building more slowly. So I think that's the thing that you need to be optimistic about. The seat's always going to be hot in New York, but take your time, build up a roster that can support a quarterback because it feels like they're far from that right now.
I mean, Drew Lock's going to play.
Yeah.
Like, if you have to convey that you've been told you're not going to be the open day starter, like, he's going to play at some point. That means someone has said, hey, I don't know, maybe week 7 if Daniel Jones, we don't want him to get banged up, we don't want him to re-tear his ACL, he's going to be out there. But I mean, like, the exciting thing for Giants fans is Neighbors. Like, that's the thing you have to be excited about, just getting a guy who's that explosive, even if he's not going to get the ball that much this year.
Yeah, he's going to get the ball, yeah.
I mean, did you see that he called off his bet with Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year?
Because of betting?
Yeah, he went to one. No, he went to one practice with the Giants.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, no,
actually,
I'm taking myself out of consideration.
Use the betting as an excuse, yeah. Okay, yeah. These things are all kind of wound up in each other a little bit because it's entirely possible that the Neighbors pick doesn't look as good as it should because of the context. I think for Giants fans, for the organization rather, there's two paths that are good. One is you get a clean, like, Jones is so bad that you can actually move on fairly early in the season so you don't risk the injury. You're still not going to be good. You get another good draft pick next year. You go for the quarterback. Or the other is he actually plays better than he did in 2022. Which, by the way, he was competent. Now, the problem in 2022, he was actually, I think, like, probably, like, average. Is a little better than average. Yeah. Very good as a runner. The option game was very good with Daboll. The problem, and I think the thing that he needs to improve upon for this path to happen, is he actually has to push the ball down the field. Over the last 2 years, Daniel Jones, and obviously he didn't play a lot of last season, averaged 6.2 air yards per attempt, which ranks 38th out of 38 passers. Ooh. Tied with actually Matt Ryan, the Colts Matt Ryan. And he has 37 attempts over 20 yards, which is tied for 43rd. Now, again, he didn't play a lot of second season. So you draft a Lamborghini, but you got a guy who's kind of might drive him like a Honda.
In his defense, this also feels like a bit of chicken and egg
Yeah,
situation.
totally.
So like,
Fair.
I'm not throwing it down the field to these nobodies either. Like that's Daniel Jones' defense. I personally am not a Daniel Jones defender, but if you want to argue that Daniel Jones has a future there and that they do want to extend him and make him the quarterback of the future, you can credibly argue that he has not ever really had a good situation. And this is the beginning. It's still not a great situation, but adding Neighbors is the beginning of a good situation.
Let's talk about the situation really quickly because it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
They rehauled the offensive line. It was this was the bigger, I think, the bigger challenge for Jones was that he was just under siege constantly. It was a non-functional offensive line. But you saw his backups push the ball downfield more than he did, by the way. Taylor and the Italian guy whose name escapes me. DeVito. So they bring in a bunch of new offensive linemen, John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, and then I think Darren Waller might retire. I don't know. So that's a question mark. Singletary, Saquon's out. Devin Singletary's in. Draft Eric Gray. The receiving group is, I don't know really what to make of it. So it's Neighbors, Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Those are like all slot receivers. I don't really like. My hope was Neighbors would land somewhere where he wouldn't have to line up outside. Like and I don't think Dable and Kafka are smart. I don't think they're going to do that. I do question how they're just going to line up because it's kind of a weird group.
And that's the thing. It's like, Jalen Hyatt really fast, sort of just wants to run straight.
Yeah.
But if you were to make the case for Jones, like you're saying, he's never played with a receiver like Neighbors. He's never played, like, who's the best receiver of his career? Darius Slayton? There's not much there. He's 18 months older than Penix, one fewer ACL tears. It's not crazy to think that with a A1 receiver, if Neighbors really comes in as awesome, that he can look competent.
The worst, but that's actually the worst possible outcome.
Case scenario.
Like you want him to either be good, to build on what you saw in 2022, where if he's better than he was in 2022, I think you feel pretty good as a Giants. You're like, all right, great, we didn't get a quarterback, but our guy's good enough. But if he's like the 18th best quarterback in the NFL, you remain on the treadmill of mediocrity. That's why I'm saying it's better if he either really sucks or he shows some improvement. But
I think, the thing that makes me most sad about this situation is I don't know what Daniel Jones could have been, but I don't think that he can become that now.
It's too late.
Yeah, I think it's too late. And I think that sometimes when you put a quarterback in a bad situation, you stunt their growth. And I think Daniel Jones maybe have some good flashes at another location somewhere else, but I don't think he's going to be the long-term answer there, in part because they never gave him a damn chance.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, the other quarterbacks came in and challenged down the field more often. They don't have the same scar tissue that Daniel Jones has had there. Like DeVito was fresh out of nowhere. Tyrod's had success other places. They're like, all right, we could throw it down the field. Daniel Jones like, I can't. I've been in the NFL for a little period of time, and you know what I know? I know that defensive linemen are going to hit me. I know that's going to happen. And I know that my receivers are going to be mediocre at best. So whatever he could have become, I think the chapter is closed. Maybe there's a Daniel Jones run as a backup somewhere else. Someone gets hurt. He's that quarterback. But I do think that they bleeped up his career.
So do you think when you guys watch Daniel Jones, do you think he's above or below the Shendoza line? Like if he was playing for Kyle
Have you heard of this before?
No,
this is Charlie.
I instantly know what it means.
Okay, well, the listeners may not know.
I think
they can figure
the average Mina Kimes show listener has heard many perversions of the name Shanahan. Could he be a Purdy if he was put in that situation? I don't know, because I do think he has a good arm. He has very good athleticism, but I don't think he has the anticipatory skills required to really operate that offense well. I think his pressure feel is not great. But again, to Domonique's point, that all those habits have been exacerbated by his awful situation. But I could see him as a kick around as a backup for a few years and then get his shot. And he's got, like I said, he's got a good arm. He's a good athlete. So it could happen. All right. Chicago. Double Doink
Oh.
asks, I know this account. This account's a real troll that I follow. How real do you think Chicago's defensive turnaround last season was? I love this question. I respect how well they played, but it was mostly against pretty bad offenses besides Detroit. LaFleur and Love put up like 430 yards on them. That's true. Do you think the defense was for real? Okay, so let me set the table here a little bit. Weeks 1 through 9, the Bears defense was 28th in EPA. They were awful at every metric. Weeks 10 through 18, that jumps to 3rd. They're also 5th in success rate. Now, 4th in opponent QBR. Now, there's a few things you look at, right, when you're trying to see, is this defense or offense performance sustainable? Yeah. Our friend Double Doink hints at one of the things, which is easy schedule. They played young. They got like a really bad Jared Goff game. Josh Dobbs, Flacco, Kyler, Heineke, who they picked off like 20 times. And then Jordan Love shredded them. He was on his like unconscious, like he was, going unconscious. So that is, I think it's not great, but I think there's some, like the performance against the Lions is for real. Other thing though you look at that does make you raise some eyebrows is turnover rate. Mm-hmm. They led the NFL in turnovers. I mentioned the Heineke game. They picked Goff off multiple times. And then finally, they were actually very healthy on defense. According to Football Outsider, from FTN now, their adjusted games lost metric, they had the 7th healthiest defense in football. So the big catalyst for the second half of the season was, of course, the Montez Sweat trade. Mm-hmm. But weirdly, they were only 30th in pass rush win, 25th in pressure rate in the second half of the season. So Domonique, let's start here. When you watched them, did you see a defense that looked improved to you, or do you think this is just fueled by crappy quarterbacks and turnovers?
So it can be both. It can be not as good as the numbers suggest, but also improved, because I definitely did see a defense that looked improved.
Yeah.
And I think Eberflus I like him as a defensive coach. I remember him in Indianapolis doing some things with his players that I hadn't seen other teams do, as far as like running cover 3 with a linebacker at the corner position, like doing complicated blitz and bluff and zone disguises that I think so while turnover luck is a thing, there are ways that you can create confusion and create chaos and increase your probability of creating turnovers. I remember that the name Eberflus stuck in my head from when he was doing some things with
Colts.
Yeah, with the Colts, with Darius Leonard and with the special athletes that they had there. And so he got re-engaged in the defense once it felt like his jaw was on the line. And that also coincided with the improvement of their defense. So I think the defense has improved. I also think that I remember, and this is a bit anecdotal, but while their turnover luck went up, Jalen Johnson really loves to bat down interceptions. So some of their turnovers could have been balanced out by that, but I do think they have him. He's a special player. They have Sweat, who's a special player, and they have a scheme and a coach that creates a scheme that it seems like is tailor fit for every matchup, and they execute it well. So, are they top of the league defense? Probably not.
Yeah,
but they aren't as bad as we thought they were.
So, I was looking at the defensive depth chart, and there's a lot to like. Mm-hmm. You mentioned. I mean, I love Montez Sweat, and I was wary of that trade when it happened, and he was awesome. Commanders fans know what they lost.
I mean, yeah, every Commanders fan, like when we had Chase Young and Montez Sweat, it was like a sort of a whisper at the beginning, like, are we sure Montez Sweat's not better than Chase Young? And then by the end, I'm like, no, trust me, you're getting the better player.
That's a classic guy on a team, like the one who's not the name, but the fans know is better. It's like the Bucks with like Levante David and Devin White, where all the Bucks fans are like, everybody knows Levante David is still like 40-year-old Levante David is still better than ever. Okay, so they're very good players. The linebacker duo is good, Edwards and Edmonds. I think that though what has to be acknowledged with this defense and what could be an issue this year is the decision to take Rome Odunze. Totally agree with. Yeah. Amazing player, but they did not address the pass rush. Yeah. So I mentioned some of the numbers. Sweat was great. That was it. I mean, nobody on this defense outside of Sweat ranked top 60 in pressure rate. DeMarcus Walker had 6 sacks. They basically got nothing from the interior. So I think they're pass rush wise. So they're hoping that Billings, Dexter, they drafted the defensive tackles on the inside, take another step. They drafted Austin Booker, who's this gigantic pass rusher I actually talked about ahead of the combine. But I look at this pass rush group and I'm like, I do like, on the back end, I think, the safeties are good. Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah.
See about Kevin Byard.
Yeah.
But
he wasn't great in Philly, but nobody was. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. He wasn't exactly. This is a much better situation for him. I just think that's my very roundabout way of saying they're probably going to settle in at about average.
Can I say one more thing, though? Is like their different schemes require you to be good in different areas. And that's the shocking thing about their defensive front is this particular scheme is one that is very much reliant on a dominant pass rush, which is why when they made the Sweat trade and everyone was like, this is crazy, I was like, yeah, it's kind of crazy, but that's kind of the key to their team. And so for this style of defense to not have a great pass rush, it is concerning.
Yeah, the 4-man rush. They don't blitz a lot.
I have to be specific. For the defensive lineman, not just a pass rush from blitz. Like, they are a scheme that is reliant on being strong with the front four.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, like, they were kind of linked to Byron Murphy Jr., and it makes, you look at the team, you're like, yeah, they really need Byron Murphy Jr. But I still think it was a good decision to take Rome because this season is about the quarterback. That's your mission now.
Also, I would wonder this. Situationally, the offense should be so much better this year.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams,
that's a great point.
Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen. How much easier does that make it for a defense where it's like, we are going to play with a lead at some point?
It speaks directly to the point that we were just making. Yeah. Maybe their pass rush isn't that bad. It's your pass rush gets a lot better when you know that the opponent is passing and you don't have a run-pass conflict. If you're up 14 in the third quarter and it's 3rd and 5, there is no conflict in your mind and you can pin your ears back, as they say.
It's weird, though, with the Bears, too, though, because the offense was so, like, up and down. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, crap, like the Jets. We got to go. Right. We got to do everything, guys. Like, there were games where Justin Fields was, like, awesome. Yeah. So it was just all over the place. And we'll see how that looks. All right. One more question before we take a break. KSBW Drea asks for an early scouting report on the little man. I will give you my report, and you guys can give me the player comp because she asked for a player comp. So I'll tell you. Yeah?
Poona Ford.
I'm going to give you the report.
Oh, my bad. you got
that's just because you've seen him and he's big.
I was going to say Marius Mims. So
okay. He is big. He is in the 94th percentile size. He is a little over 7 months. I think he weighs over maybe 25 pounds now. He's getting to the point where, like, when I carry him for a really long time, my back hurts. He's definitely outgrown Lenny, and he's long and heavy, but he's heavier than he is long. Physically, pretty advanced, no big deal. Crawling very quickly, 7 months. Already trying to hoist himself up. Like when I put him on the walker thing, he'll stand on his own and he's like intrigued by it. He's got, as you've seen, enormous legs, haunches really. So those are the strengths, I would say. He's somewhat coachable. Sleep training took about 2 weeks and it mostly stuck. There's been a couple of regressions. I don't know if he can learn a playbook, but he will eat it. If you put it in front of him, he will get his 2 teeth on it. That said, he freelances a lot. No respect for the boundaries I set in our house. I just bought a gate, so that is hopefully being installed in my absence right now. So that's the.
I love that he does not respect your system. It's like very much like go find ball, see ball, get ball, and you guys better cover up for him in the back end.
So what do you think? Any players come to mind?
I already said my players. He is a nose, that's for sure. We're going to put that athlete at nose and let him eat the middle of the field. You said he's going to get his mouth on it, put him there.
Sounds sort of like a cross between Aaron Donald and the Honey Badger.
Yeah, I like that. He has the same, when Aaron Donald would just kind of like jump on guys' backs. I don't know what to call it. It's not a word for it. I mean, he does that like flying hump move that's just like, honestly one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's just so upsetting. And then I'll never forget. We can say this now and laugh. Alex Smith in his first game back from the
first
injury,
thing I was thinking.
When Aaron Donald jumped on his back, I screamed. I feel like half of America was like, ah! and then he like rode him like a backpack.
It was those movies where it's like there's a doctor in the movie and they show way too much of the surgery and you end up covering your eyes, like it's way scarier than a horror movie. That's what it felt like watching that Aaron Donald, Alex Smith play.
Horrible. Alex is fine. He survived it. So that was the thing. All right. Let's take a quick break.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire.
All right. Next question is about a team that I have not talked about. I really tried to choose teams that I've been, I guess, neglecting, as I say. This is from JZN. I am not going to read that name out loud. How much are my Bills going to drop off since we got rid of half of our team and the ones we replaced them with are rookies or stink? Okay, so I have an optimistic angle on this and a pessimistic, or I guess little critical angle. Which should I start with? The optimistic side or the pessimistic side?
Start pessimistic and then finish with some joy.
This is so funny. This is describing our personalities. I was going to say start optimistic.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, okay, one's one side of the ball. Why don't you guys guess? Which side of the ball do you think I'm actually more optimistic about?
The one with Josh Allen on it?
So, no.
Oh.
Although it's Josh Allen. They'll probably be fine. However, I have more questions about the offense than the defense because while JZN is worried about replacing their players, here's the thing. On defense, it's all kind of players that they could afford to lose, honestly. Looking at this depth chart, yes, you lost Jordan Poyer, Terrell Dodson to the Seahawks, Jordan Phillips, Dane Jackson, Tre'Davious White. Fine. I don't know. None of those players, I'm like, oh no, what are they going to do without blank? I mean, White has been banged up. He's barely played.
It's players they could afford losing and players that they already lost in many cases, frankly, that they've already shown the ability to adjust for and coach around.
And that is, frankly, why I'm kind of optimistic about them, because this is a Bills defense that finished the year 8th in EPA per play. They obviously struggled a bit at times near the end, but they're just unbelievably injured. 10th highest adjusted games lost on defense, which feels low, to be honest, given the caliber of the players that they lost. One of those players, Matt Milano, is probably the best player on the defense, is coming back. I think Greg Rousseau is a good pass rusher. See what you can get out of Von Miller at this point. I mean, the pass rush isn't great. But despite that, they still finished with the 3rd highest 4-man rush pressure rate, 5th in opponent QBR. Run defense was still very good. Sean McDermott is a really good defensive coach.
Yeah.
I know we clown the guy for many things, deservedly. A defense is not one of them, especially he took over this defense, you remember.
I had the same feeling as you last year. Is there are certain teams, and nice job. There's certain teams and players, coaches and teams that I think have earned my respect. And what happened to that team last year, Sean McDermott earned my respect. And
it was the speech.
Yeah, it was definitely not the speech.
You saw the speech and you said, that's my guy.
It was definitely not the speech.
But a leader.
It was the way that they responded, not just to the injuries, but to they were down to like a less than 1% chance at one point to make the playoffs.
That can't be
that to me that's not fake. That's real. And then they had answers for all the problems, and they've developed corners, or one corner at least, Christian Benford. I really like him. He's a young corner. I'm biased because he grew up in my neighborhood. But and Rasul Douglas has played well. He's not great, but he's a good corner. And that defense is something that I think is going to be solid no matter what. And sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but the thing that I appreciate about NFL is everybody in NFL is good, and I think we underappreciate how important it is how well coached the team is and how well prepared the team is, because nobody on the field is bad. There are some guys who are great and they'll change the team, but if you have a good coach and you're well prepared, you can pretty much get reasonable defense out of just about any group. And if they're great, they're a good defense, which is what they got.
Offensively, Charlie.
This
is why.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of the flip side where I'm like, no, they actually lost. I mean, Stephon Diggs, as much as he struggled a bit in the second half of the season and was used differently, that is a massive loss for him.
Yeah.
Gabe Davis is gone, who, every other game was awesome. You replace them with Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel. It's pretty hard to see that as an upgrade without knowing exactly who Keon Coleman is going to be outside of the most delightful off-the-field personality in the NFL.
Yeah, that's the Keon Coleman of it all is pretty interesting to me. I do wonder if they really had a round one grade on him going into the draft, because the vibes have to be a little bit weird trading that pick to the Chiefs where they get Xavier Worthy. Yeah. It's another weapon. The last time they traded a pick to the Chiefs, it was Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, are we really helping the team that just knocked us out in the playoffs? And that game, there were points in that game where it's like, we talked so much about those offenses not being like dominant last year. And at the end of that game, it felt like a shootout. And it felt like these teams needed to upgrade offensively, and the Chiefs did and the Bills didn't. And to me, it's almost like the comparison there is the thing that's hurting the Bills. I know that the Bills will be fine offensively with Josh Allen at times. Like, he's so dominant as a runner, and he opens so many things up that they're not going to be
They'll be
terrible
fine.
Offense.
Yeah, they're going to run the ball well too, but they added a back, right? Let me try to remember who they added. I feel like they drafted a running back, I think, to add on to with James Cook. Yeah, I think the problem is I'm not quite sure how this group fits together necessarily. I have mentioned this a few times, the website Reception Perception that charts receivers. You guys should check it out. It's really cool because they look at their success versus man and zone and different kinds of routes. And one thing that was a little bit alarming about Keon Coleman was his lack of success versus man coverage. He's very good versus zone, which he could be better at in the NFL. And actually, the Matt Harmon's write-up said something which I also kind of thought watching him, which is like, okay, we think he looks like a big X receiver. You just line up outside and has to be pressed. But reality in the NFL, you probably want him in the slot a fair amount. Problem is in Buffalo, they need someone to play outside. They have Curtis Samuel. And Stephon Diggs, was often the answer versus man coverage. Like, who's that guy on this roster? I don't know.
Here, I guess. I don't know. Like, the answers, they don't really have them. And Charlie and I have this conversation. Charlie knows what type of receivers I like and what type I don't like. And I love Keon Coleman as a person, but he's not the type of receiver that I like. I like Stephon Diggs, who is going to get space and get open type of guy. And maybe for Josh Allen, he's gotten over his accuracy issues in part because Stephon Diggs helps him gain whatever confidence he needs. But they're not going to be big windows with Keon Coleman. And it's going to be trust. It's going to be a trust situation. And Keon Coleman is just so lovable. He called Andre Reed. Like, he's just doing all the right things. Do
you guys think Dalton Kincaid's going to be the number one receiver this year? Is that when they're going into the season? Is that how they view it?
I think it's going to be, it's funny, Chiefs-like. So like I think there's gonna be a pretty like even target distribution amongst all these guys. They played a fair amount of 12 personnel. I expect them to lead into that even more. I mean, this offense is gonna evolve, so not too dissimilarly from how the Chiefs did.
The Chiefs also, the whole body of the Chiefs, they had such a good defense that it wasn't as much pressure on the offense. And then late game situations, you can go to Kelsey. As much confidence that we have in the coaching staff and the young talent that they have on defense, they're not going to be like a dominant defense like the Chiefs defense was. So they're going to need more than what the Chiefs did offensively last year if they expect to be competitive.
All right. Cowboys. I really have
Why'd you look at me?
Talked about the Cowboys because you're part of the problem. You're on the lamestream television media, and all you do is talk about the Cowboys.
Love them.
Santa Fe golf pro Kirk says, I like this question. The Cowboys are 36-15 over the last 3 years. Dak is great. Why is everyone losing their mind? Well, because Dak Prescott might not be your quarterback in a year because of the way I actually think he will be. But I'm going to use this rather just to ask you guys kind of not to talk about the general media obsession with the Cowboys or whatever, but do you think people are correct to be as upset about their offseason as they've been? And by people, I mean, well, pretty much everyone. I mean, the Cowboys have been almost universally criticized for not signing more free agents, for not getting deals done with any of their star players. Charlie, I'll start with you. Like, when you look at them, you're a fan of a team in the same division. Do you feel good about this? Do you feel like Cowboys have taken a step?
Oh yeah, Dak held them hostage. He's got that massive cap number, and they need to find a way to extend him and lower the number, and they haven't yet. And the team hasn't improved. Look, the NFC East is so wide open. We don't know if the Eagles are going to be good. We're pretty sure the Commanders and the Giants aren't going to be like dominant teams. The Cowboys are going to be fine. They're going to win 10, 11, 12 games like they do every single year. But that's not really the bar for this team.
Yeah.
And I do not, like, if you were to ask me to go through the thought exercise of how do they stack up against the other best teams in the NFC, which is not a dominant conference, I don't think they move the needle to be better than the 49ers, the Lions, the Packers type of thing. And that's what they're going to be judged by. And if that's the case, they aren't all in the way Jerry said they were going to be at the start of the offseason.
So I found myself much of this offseason defending the Cowboys' decision-making, but it's getting harder because I think that they've done a great job of drafting, trading at the right time, signing the right free agents. Like, I love the Gilmore pickup last year. All those things, like, they've done a good job, and they've earned some respect. The things that they've messed up, though, it seems like the thing that they're messing up again is they messed up on paying Dak when they first had the chance. It feels like as the offseason continues to evolve, the whole offseason I've been saying, look, this is not a team that needs to spend a bunch of money on free agency. This is a team that needs to pay the great players that they already drafted that are in here and make some tweaks here or there. They haven't made the tweaks, and they haven't paid the great players that they need to pay. So it's hard to continue to defend them if they're not going to do those things, because those are the only goals, the only objectives of this offseason was like, you got to pay some combination of CD, Micah, and Dak. You got to pay them. They ain't done it. So I assume that they have something figured out. At some point, they're going to announce it. Maybe. I'm hoping that's the last-ditch effort. But other than that, like, it seems really
they're like someone who got criticized for being too flashy in how they dress and showed up wearing just like, like all black or like a super modest outfit or something. I don't know. Cause like, it's almost like they're trying to like show off how unflashy they are this offseason. They're not doing any of the big contracts. They drafted offensive linemen. They brought in like a veteran linebacker. They brought in like this veteran coach, lost in all this, Mike Zimmer being their defensive coordinator. These are all like unsexy moves. And I agree with a lot of them. Yeah. Like drafting, like, look, this organization has won my trust when it comes to drafting offensive linemen, and they needed to draft offensive linemen. So there are things, I guess I'm kind of split because I think there are things that they did this offseason that I think were the right things to do, but I can't defend the lack of contract. It's just bad business from the outside. There's just no... and they backed themselves into this corner with their stars who, like, they need all of them. Yeah. All three of them.
The Dak thing is a result of them blowing it last time. Yeah. Now he has a no trade and all these other things, and now it seems like they're blowing it again. And that, like, it's wild. It's indefensible. And I don't know why they wouldn't. What's the issue with CD and Micah? Like, maybe you can't pay them all, but you got to pay a couple of them.
You have to pay them all.
No, I just mean maybe you can't pay them all now.
Oh, yeah, right.
But you got to pay a couple of them before we kick off, before the Ravens and the Chiefs start this season. You got to extend somebody.
It's also just like, it's hard to get the taste out of everyone's mouth of seeing that Packers game.
Yeah.
Just seeing the way that, Jordan Love was not supposed to be ready to do that to a Cowboys team. And you go into the offseason being like, we thought we were close. There was a point when we thought they were the best team in the NFC early in the season. And
I think,
no,
they were. Yeah. I mean, this offense for most of the season was like unbelievable.
The stretch that Dak played,
Dak was the MVP,
and
like
I'd never seen him play that.
But I think, Charlie, you make a really good point about the last taste in our mouth, because the Ravens struggled in their last outing against the Chiefs, but that one we kind of know why. We're like, okay, it was a bad game plan. They got thrown off. They didn't run the ball. Those are all things when we look at that, we say they lost this way. We can see how it doesn't happen again. I think the problem with the Cowboys is now we're coming off of two postseasons, where they lost, and I don't think any of us have answers other than play better.
And the Ravens were competitive against the eventual Super Bowl champs. The Cowboys got their ass dusted by a team that we didn't even think was going to make the playoffs, let alone advance to the next round. So, like, it's a real bad look. And then it's on the heels of several other seasons where they lost to teams in the playoffs that we thought they should have beat at home. So, like, we can pretend like it's the same comparison if we want to, but it's not.
It's not.
And the Ravens are the opposite. They're a team that we consistently see, like, get the best out of their players in those situations. So, yeah, the Cowboys ain't the Ravens, even though they draft well.
Okay. Gridwood analyst AOK says, maybe a boring question. What team is most likely to go from 4th to 1st? So I want to pitch a team to you guys.
All right.
And I want you to tell me what you think. The obvious one is the Bengals because they didn't have Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Duh.
Mm-hmm.
No fun.
Boring. I can see the Bears being thrown around, but it's a very difficult division. But obviously, incredibly flashy, offseason, new quarterback, all of that. Here's my pitch to you. The Tennessee Titans.
Mm.
The weirdest offseason insofar as I don't think people thought of them as a team that was close to contention, but they are acting like a team that is close to contention. You go out, you sign Calvin Ridley to a big contract. You trade for L'Jarius Sneed. I'm looking at this roster. Right now, the wide receiver group is Hopkins, D-Hop, still really good, Calvin Ridley. They signed Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks. That's kind of insane. You're rebuilding the offensive line, to be sure. You draft J.C. Latham. You sign Tony Pollard to replace Derrick Henry. And then you bring in Brian and Bill Callahan. If Will Levis is good, they're a playoff team. If he's good.
That's the question.
Yeah,
like, that's the question. So I think that's an interesting one. But they're also, the toughest thing about making a projection like 4th to 1st is there's always a good team in that division.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for this to happen, we need C.J. Stroud to get sick for several weeks or something, right? Or we need that team to take a step back because as good as Will Levis can be, I don't imagine that team is going to be better than the Texans. So, like, they are showing a lot. They're doing the opposite of what happened with Daniel Jones. It's like, all right, Will Levis showed us a little bit. Let's give him everything and find out what we really got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I saw this question and I struggled with picking any 4th to 1st. I know there will be one.
The
and
Bengals
is the obvious one. But, like, the Titans, like, yeah, it's Stroud, but also the Colts could be way better with Richardson in the few games that we saw. And, like, that they have to leapfrog that team. The Jaguars, while disappointing, still have solid quarterback play and, like, should be a decent team.
Yeah.
The team this is knock on wood, it's the ultimate kind of horror, but team to me that's one injury away is the Chargers in the AFC West, like, which is, you don't even want to put it into the universe, but Harbaugh, we still believe in Herbert.
You're going to make Mina nauseous because it's still the defense.
Yeah.
It's still the defense.
Oh, no, the team has a million holes, but it's just
but
the Broncos and the
you
Raiders.
already know they have the quarterback,
Yeah.
and that quarterback is going to be better protected probably than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
You got a great coach.
Good coach. I'm doing, spoiler, my top 10 coaches, and I was like, I can't put Jim Harbaugh back on immediately, can I? I don't know. You'll have to listen to find out. But I was looking at head coaching winning records in the NFL, and I forgot that Jim Harbaugh is like top 6 or 7 of all time. I mean, it's only 4 seasons, so, but still.
Pretty impressive.
With my guy LaFleur. I think the Bengals are probably the right answer because of the quarterback, and then the Titans, to me, also is just a little bit AFC South chaos, which actually brings me to another team in the AFC South that someone asked about. Nick Hennion, what is a likelier outcome for the Colts this season? 11 wins or 6 wins? The Colts are one of the hardest teams, I think, to project in the entire NFL.
I'll let Charlie take this because he's in love with the quarterback.
I love Richardson.
Really?
Yeah, before that draft, the first time I saw him play as a sophomore at Florida, I texted our friend Bomani Jones and was like, he's going to be the first pick in the draft in 2 years. I was wrong, obviously, but I was like, this guy has such ridiculous tools. And then obviously, it's scary that he can't protect himself. And it didn't matter that he was 6'4", 250 and running a 4.5, because I was like, if you can't avoid collisions, like, that's one of the most amazing things about prime Russell Wilson or Lamar Jackson. They just seem to never get hit. And Richardson seems to be the opposite of that. But he felt ahead of schedule last year. And if he's a really dominant athlete at the position, I don't know why they can't get 2 more wins this year.
It's an offense that finished 13th in DVOA with substandard quarterback play.
Mm-hmm.
is substandard meaner than below average? Should I say below? Anyways, it wasn't great. The coach is excellent, Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
I think he showed that he was why we were so excited about that hire. The offensive line did rebound some, which is really significant because in the final years with like Matt Ryan, you saw players, some of the really good players on that line take a step back. They looked better last year. I talked about the draft. I love the addition of Adonai Mitchell. I love how he fits with Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Get a full season with Jonathan Taylor. So I think to get to 11 wins, you would need Richardson to obviously take a leap. I think if you start at that baseline of 13th in DVOA, if you rise into, let's say, 10th, it's defense that it's actually, let me hit the defense because that would actually be my biggest concern. Defense that finished slightly below average last season, returns a lot of the same players. You add Lau Tulatu. The pass rush kind of rules. Yeah. They actually finished 5th in pass rush win last year. DeForest Buckner remains awesome. Kwity Paye was good. Ebukam got you 8 and 10 sacks. You add Latu. That's great. The problem is secondary. Don't look. Can you guys name 2 Colts corners?
No, absolutely not.
Reasonable. And I bring that up because this was a team everyone thought was going to add a cornerback. They were reportedly in the L'Jarius Sneed competition.
Kenny Moore is good.
Kenny Moore is the good corner.
Yeah. And
I mean, Juju Brent's he's young, but everybody thought they were going to add an outside corner and they didn't. And I guess the question is, can the pass rush be good enough to compensate for that?
Not consistently. And this is where all the interconnected stuff matters is it goes back to can they get off to good, fast starts with Anthony Richardson and get a lead and force teams to be one-dimensional. It's a whole different story because if you're in secondary play is very much dependent on, because of the rules and the evolution of the game, it's very much dependent on the execution of the offense. And offensive execution will be determined a lot by the situation of the game. And if you can put teams behind and allow your pass rush to attack and force them to keep in more blockers or force them to be a quick pass team, then you're asking every quarterback to be Drew Brees all the way down the field, which isn't going to happen. So I think that is the optimistic look at it. I think as we talk about it, it's more likely that they have 6 wins than it is 11 wins. But 11 wins is not out of the realm of possibility. It depends on how healthy Anthony Richardson is and how good Shane Steichen can help him become quickly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
As a Colts fan, I mean, you think, okay, we actually were kind of pushing last year, with Minshew. So I can see how that would be disappointing. But the most important thing is to figure out that you got the quarterback and feel good.
Just enjoy the fever. Enjoy the fever.
He's big, man. He walked by me at the Combine in Indianapolis, and I was like, oh, my God. What is he, 6'3", 4?
6'4".
4? He is a big dude.
Do you remember the Combine when this is not to pick on Bryce Young, but they had the quarterbacks come out one after the other for their press availability, and it was like Bryce Young and then immediately Anthony Richardson, and their presence just looked so different on the TV screen.
You got to choose who you stand next to somehow. You got to bribe someone to try to stand next to Jake Haener or something. All right. A little bit of a different kind of question, but I thought it'd be fun to ask you guys this. David Minchala says, assuming Amazon Web Services can measure anything you want that happens on or off a football field, create a new metric that would help you better evaluate a team, player, or game, help you project future outcomes. So just like a dream, like a metric you'd like to have. Domonique, you go first.
I think eye discipline would be something that we can't measure.
Like for a second, like linebackers?
Everybody, like anyone, quarterbacks, linebackers, secondary players. It's so much about keys in this game, and I think it's really hard because the game moves fast, and that's something that we haven't tried to measure yet or know how to measure. Is like, where is the player's eyes? Now, where is his head pointing? Where is his eyes? Are his eyes always in the right spot? And I think that's something when you speak to like play action become a big part of this game. Like the play action is easy to read if you're looking at the right thing, but it's really hard to be looking at the right things all the time.
Eric Eager, used to be with PFF and just got hired by the Panthers, had a paper basically measuring the steps that linebackers take in response to play action. Now, it it's not like a metric that we have available to us, but I'm like, that would be really.
I know that from being a secondary player where like, where are your eyes in man coverage? Like it's important to snap of the ball. You're at the quarter. If you're off, you're at the quarterback. Then you go to the receiver through the intermediate, and then you have to flip your eyes back to the quarter. Like all that stuff, I think is hard. It speaks a little bit to, if you remember, Belichick, or no, it wasn't Belichick, it was Saban, I think, during the draft, explaining or kind of defining what sports instincts are. And I think that's part of it. It's like being able to, that millisecond decision making is in part because you're reading the right keys.
Another tool that got me thinking about is Kareem Kassam. He used to be with the Steelers. Now he's a company called Zealous Analytics. They do work for NFL teams. Showed me a tool that they have where it basically uses tracking data and artificial intelligence to show you like when players are open, and you can watch it. He showed me like, you see a quarterback, so you got like, I don't know, Jared Goff or whatever, and everybody, you got 5 men running, and it shows like bubbles that expand and contract when they're open, and like they're like green, and then when they're open, then whatever. And what it does is show you how often quarterbacks correctly throw into those spaces, or their timing and anticipation. I'm like, it's still in the early phases, I think, but like that's something that would be really useful.
So mine is sort of similar, but it's from like the coaching and play calling perspective. I wish there was like a scheme win rate stat, because we know there's third down efficiency, there's stuff like that, but I would like to know on leverage plays, how many of the successful plays are because of the player or the coaching? Like guys fly
were they in the right
open.
position?
Yeah, or like guys fly wide open because a route combination just completely beat the defense, or they tricked them and ran to a really open spot.
Yeah, because we do receiver metrics that account for like openness.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, how much of that is the product of the receiver versus, this motion got them open. But some of that, of course, is the failure of the defense too. Yeah. But yeah, that's really interesting. That was kind of actually a direction my mind went in with receivers, which is, and I think this is quite doable, gravity. Like I want to know how much when Tyreek Hill is on the field, how much more how many more yards do cornerbacks account for with him, where they're like pulled by him? Let's say like a safety. How often does a safety tilt over to him? That feels pretty doable. Yeah, I'd like to see that. John Hill says Nate Tyson, Robert Mays, shout out to friends of the show, recently talked about the Seahawks saying it's hard to determine if they're going to be good or stink. I'd agree. As a fan, I'm hopeful. Are you, or is another mess season ahead? So I did see a funny comment. I think I shared it with Charlie, where somebody, a Seahawks fan, commented on one of our YouTubes and was like, I feel like Mina never talks about the Seahawks. She's like our mom, who is the teacher who doesn't acknowledge us in class because she doesn't want people to know she's our mom. You're right. I actually try not to talk about the Seahawks too much, just to avoid alienating people. But they are a very interesting team, and I think a very confusing team. I think opinions on them will be all over the place. So I'll tell you what I think, of course. Yeah. But let me know what do you guys think of the Seahawks headed into the 2024 season?
They got the right coach.
Yeah.
That's exciting for me for the long-term picture. I think season to season is hard to project. They have a quarterback that is above average, and they have the right coach, and I think a defensive scheme that is going to be modernized. So, like, I'm optimistic about the Seahawks' future. I don't know if it all comes to fruition this season, because that division is one that, I mean, the Rams are supposed to stink for you guys for a few years. Like, they owed you that.
At least Aaron Donald's gone.
Yeah, that's
the aforementioned human backpack is out of the picture.
My big concern with the Seahawks is it took 2 years for the Ravens to really come together defensively under Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
And I know that some of these great coaches, you saw that with 2 years with Kyle Shanahan when he was in Atlanta, where it like took a second for it all to click with Matt Ryan, then he was MVP guy. And I wonder if this is a 2-year build with this team. But what's exciting though, and this is a point that Ben Solak made on the Ringer about Geno Smith. It's like, why do you pay this guy? He's above average, but you don't think he's a superstar quarterback. But having someone like that is like a perfect steward to develop the offense. And it keeps guys like DK Metcalf and JSN engaged in growing as players. And even if they're not going to be great this year, it's such a tough division. But I think they're going to be good moving forward.
I mean, I think Geno's good quarterback.
Yeah, good.
I have made no secret about that. And I also think that the offense could be better. The defense is where I'm concerned. I think your point is excellent about it taking a second, and obviously they traded for Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith isn't walking through that door, and there's a lot of change on defense. But first on the offense, the other hire that I'm really excited about was Ryan Grubb from UW. It was fun through the draft process to kind of watch all of my friends who cover the NFL watch the Huskies, who of course he had amazing personnel to work with. I think he's really talented, really creative. And I think while I'm not Shane Waldron hater, there were some problems with that offense that contributed to their struggles on third down in the red zone. I thought they didn't throw it to the middle of the field enough. I talked about this on NFL Live the other day. Major lapses in pass protection. So now you've kind of revamped the interior of the offensive line. That, to me, will go a long way towards determining whether or not this offense, which kind of fell from being top 8 or so to maybe top 12 last year. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think they can get back into that group because the skill players are awesome. Yeah. Geno Smith is good. The run game is good. So that's the offense. I think the offense is good. Defense, I think it's going to be a bit of a work in progress. I mean, I love the Byron Murphy Jr. pick. Yeah. You get Uchenna Nwosu, who's really, really underrated. But linebacker, changing over, safety. There's a couple veteran safeties out there. I could see them bringing one of them in. Yeah. There's just question marks. And, that Ravens defense was so strong up the spine, which I think is partially why they drafted Byron Murphy Jr. But it feels like they're still a couple of players away from Mike McDonald executing his vision.
A tiny bit behind the curtain, we did all these mock drafts on Mina's YouTube. And Mina, you would get so excited every time Byron Murphy dropped to the Seahawks. Every single time. It happened in like 6 straight drafts.
If I'm the Seahawks, I'm running to the podium. Yeah. So I guess TLDR, I think the offense could be top 10. I think the defense, the goal is just to be average. I mean, this defense was so bad. Yeah. I think that's what's so frustrating about the Geno, that like everybody always is like, oh, they need a quarterback. I'm like, what? Do people just not watch this team? They could not stop the run. James Conner ran for like 600 yards on them.
Yeah, people can't get over their priors with Geno.
He's good.
Geno is good. He's not like Josh Allen, but nobody is. So it's about as good as. That's the thing about this quarterback conversation. It's always like, everyone thinks they're going to get Patrick Mahomes eventually, and you're not. So, build your team the way that you build your team. And if you find a quarterback like Geno, you're lucky to have him. Hold on.
And it's just you can't develop these other guys without someone as good as Geno. Someone
That's
who's
fair.
It's just so interesting to me the way we think about these contracts, where it's like it hurts these other guys. They aren't the players you want them to be without.
So accurate and aggressive throwing downfield. Yeah. Sometimes there's issues with decision making, but if I'm a receiver, I love playing with him. Yeah. Okay, Christine, this is off football. We're going to do a couple more. Christine asks, how do you prepare for Around the Horn? I see people like Monica, Courtney, and you analyzing, calling games for teams, yet somehow you all know so much about other teams in sports. It's mind-blowing. Christine, thank you. I mentioned this earlier. You guys are in the heart of the NBA season, which you cover pretty aggressively on your podcast. We do NBA aggressively. We do the NBA, obviously, on Around the Horn. So I'm going to, because football, I talk about, but with other sports, for me, I watch. It's a lot easier with NBA, especially in the playoffs, of course. But I just watch a lot, and I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts, and that really informs how I watch the games. There are certain writers who I know are a must read after, certain beat reporters who I love. I read Zach religiously, Zach Lowe, obviously. So it's kind of like figuring out who you trust, noticing the things that they look for and notice, from stats to things in games, and then trying to do the same for me has really informed how I watch basketball.
Other than all those things, producers really help. We got some good producers who I think the best thing is what you do with friends in sports is we have conversations that are just friends hanging out and talking trash and having arguments. And by the time you get to the end of a 30-minute sports argument, you have refined your opinion, or you've come up with new ideas that maybe are stolen, and you use those. I mean,
I ask Charlie for basketball opinions all the time. Yeah. That goes back to when he was the producer of Highly Questionable, which is a show. It was also a general sports show. I wasn't asking you football stuff necessarily, but if something we talked about basketball, and I would just be like, what is this, a bad opinion? What do you think of this? What should I look like? I don't know. Your producers are extremely important, especially when you're on shows that work across sports.
Yeah. So I always look at this from the production side of it, which is first thing, I think of it in a few steps. First thing is just read everything you can from people you trust. There's no replacing that, of getting all the details. It's invaluable. two is enjoying it and soft launching the takes, like having conversations with you guys where you can just sort of test things out, but you want to make sure you don't want to sound like an idiot. That's like step one, don't sound like an idiot. Step two, make a good point. And then it's like you watch these games, you start to get to know the players, and I think there's two ways to think about your points and stuff, is either starting incisive and expanding out, being like, this is something I noticed that might not be the common opinion, but here's how it connects to the larger conversation, or going the opposite way. And like, here's the broad topic. I need to lay this out for you to get to something that's special and different, and is something that isn't just what you're going to read on Twitter if you just refresh your feed over and over again.
Yeah. That's great advice. Eric Reidholm gave me a piece of advice when I first started doing, I think Around the Horn actually, that I just has stuck with me so much when I talk about sports other than football, which is just figure out what's interesting to you. So whether it was reading a research packet or talking to you, if something just kind of clicks in my mind, like, oh, this doesn't usually happen, but this is happening, or whatever, just kind of, rather than trying to have like the right answer or the most comprehensive answer, identifying like something that I find interesting. I feel like from your end, though, producing Mina Highly Questionable, probably the hardest part wasn't the A's where we would talk about sports, but was the B's where we would just watch funny videos, because I would just be like, I have literally nothing to say about this. It's a guy walking into a train. I'm just dead silent awkwardly.
I mean, you were incredible at that though, because you genuinely enjoyed everything that Poppy and Dan would say on those shows. So there was no faking it, which was like, once you're doing the reaction videos, like just having a good time is infectious.
It helps with Poppy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the opinions, I don't know. I feel I agree with everything that you guys said, but the other thing I think is people aren't watching these shows. There's a small portion of people that are watching these shows so that they can be super smart on sports. I think most people are watching and listening to these shows because they want to have a good time, which is, to your point, is like, I like working with you guys.
Yeah.
Let's have fun. And yeah, the sports stuff will be what it's going to be, but let's have a good damn time.
Yeah, and there's always a balance because you guys have subject matter expertise, so bringing that in the things that you want, but then you just want to avoid the like, Nikola Jokic is overrated. Like, let me just sink into something that's totally wrong.
Why are we giving away all of our secrets so someone can make a show and beat us?
Some people listen to these. Most people watch them and they want the vibe and to be entertained, but some people listen to them as podcasts.
Yeah.
Like Around the Horn has.
Oh, yeah.
People used to listen to the Highly Questionable podcast, which was insane to me. The concept of Do You Question, where it just be like
listening to people talk about a video that you're not seeing. Yeah.
And Dan just scream, like just jam. Oh my God, blah, 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 blah. Like, how could you do that for the last 10 minutes of a 20-minute
or just
podcast?
Me laughing what does a missed high five sound like in podcast form? Just screaming.
We got
Dan
her
going
again.
nuts. He had those poppers things.
Oh my God.
Confetti things. Okay, final question comes from Domonique Foxworth.
Oh.
Why did you tell me to watch Sugar on Apple TV? I feel like I couched
Can we spoil this? I feel like.
Oh God, I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, we
wait,
won't.
hold on. Okay.
All right, give them time.
We're gonna spoil. Okay, listen, because I do want to talk to someone about this. Okay, if you're listening to this and you plan on watching Sugar, stop now. Podcast's almost over. You're fine. Just stop. Just stop it. Or you can
switch over to my podcast.
Yeah, so switch over. We are going to spoil the show. Nobody get mad at me. I have given you the biggest cushion possible to turn this off. Do not keep listening. Buyer beware. Spoiler alert. Okay.
Mina, what the?
Okay, so Charlie, you haven't watched this, right?
No.
It is a Apple TV show. It's like a noir, modern noir. Colin Farrell is a detective. I like all that kind of stuff. I love detective stuff. I love Tokyo Vice. We just watched, which is amazing. So we watch it, and the first 5 episodes, you're like, okay, he's like a very ultra capable detective who finds missing people. And there's some weird stuff. He's obsessed with Hollywood, and it constantly shows these Hollywood clips for no reason, old Hollywood clips.
And I think I figured out why they did. But anyway,
yeah, now I know.
Yeah, right.
So you're watching, you're like, oh, it's a little corny, but like whatever. It's like a good mystery.
Good, I like it.
Episode 6, he kills a bunch of dudes, and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. He's got like really good fighting skills. And you're watching this, and 6 episodes in, the very end of the episode, he's like, he's with a woman who's like asleep in his hotel room. He's looking in the mirror and he's like, I'm tired. I just want to go home. And you're like, oh, wow. And then all of a sudden, he turns into an alien. It makes no sense. There's no, Domonique, what was your reaction when this happened?
So my reaction, so Mina told me to watch this show. And
I feel like.
No, she didn't recommend it. She said, I want to talk to somebody about this show, but no one's watched it. So can you watch it? And so I watched it, and the whole time I'm watching it with a critical eye because she made it clear that she wasn't recommending it. So I'm like picking out the things, and I was like, all right, I don't like this. Like, I don't like this. This is a little corny, but overall, I'm enjoying the show. And I'm like, all right, well, this is a cool show. It's getting to the end of the final episode. I'm prepping to shoot the Mina. I finished it. It was all right. It was cool. I get it. I don't get it. And then the man turns to a blue alien. I was like,
turns blue.
Is this Avatar?
Looks like Avatar.
What are we doing?
It's Colin Farrell. He just looks
turned
like
into a Navi on me. And I guess if I went back and watched all over again, maybe there'd be other clues that would have made this interesting. But there weren't enough clues to make this twist. It felt like to me, like how at the end of a movie or a show, they just say, well, it was all a dream.
Yeah.
It felt like one of those kind of cop-outs where it's like,
Lost.
so what did we do this for?
I legit was hanging on every word because I was going to be like, this sounds like part 2 to season 2 of True Detective. Nope.
Did you think that the words coming out of my mouth would have been he's an alien?
No.
Yeah, that's the experience of watching the show. There's no, and then they're like the clues were there all along. No, they aren't. Like you can look back and say, okay, he clearly learned about humanity from watching movies. And there's moments where he's like kind of shaky, and again, he's like a really good fighter. None of that is enough. I forgot, somebody told me, I can't remember who said it was. One of my friends said that, I guess Alan Sepinwall, who's the TV writer, said that they should have done the twist in like episode 2 or 3. Right. Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
Yeah. Agree. I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. And like their little community society, like
of aliens,
don't ruin the mission. It's like so that stuff is kind of corny, and it
gets really corny.
It does. It's a tough watch, but I still do. I have to be honest though. The end, I enjoyed watching the show. I wouldn't say that I thought it was good. I certainly wouldn't recommend.
There's still one left, right?
There's one what?
One more episode, right?
Is there?
Maybe we're behind.
I hope not.
I think there's one more.
Well, maybe it'll save it all for me. But like I enjoyed watching the show for what it was. And then that last little thing at the end was like, the hell are you guys doing to me? It annoyed me.
All right. We are wrapping with content recommendations for the 10 people who are still listening because they watched the show Sugar.
And they're with us.
So I will go first. I made a playlist. You can check it out on Spotify. It's called Mina Bops. It's 50 of my favorite songs. I never recommend music, and it's partially because I just don't listen to new music, which is a real problem. But it's songs from like the previous 4 decades. So check it out.
I started watching Dark Matter on Apple TV. It's I don't read as much as I used to or wanted to, but it is a book that I read that I really enjoyed the book. First couple of episodes are okay. I'm concerned that it's going to be too late because it's attacking a lot of the themes that I think have been popular in sci-fi, like which path do I choose? It's a very multiversal type of show, which I'm like, oh. Like when I read this book, it was before that had taken over. But anyway, and also like for a lighter, more fun thing, I really like Loot on Apple TV. I'm hooked on Apple TV right now. Loot is really funny. I'm a sucker for Maya Rudolph.
The show is fun to look at too because it's like
pretty,
rich
bright
people
colors,
stuff.
yeah.
So I just want to say right now that if we were producing Highly Questionable and I was editing it, I would have turned one of you blue for this segment with 100% certainty. My content rec, I mean, I'm going to be very basic here, but it's the movie Challengers.
I'm going to watch that.
I haven't seen it yet.
Insanely good soundtrack.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be drawn in because of, there's the throuple in the trailer and it has S&M by Rihanna. And it's like, this is going to be this high intensity thing. Unexpected love story. And like, I love things where there's an unexpected love story is sort of the like B plot that sort of defines the characters. One of our favorite shows, Halt and Catch Fire, that was sort of underneath all of it. And it's a movie that, it's the biggest movie in America right now, but you leave it and you think about it for different days of what things mean. Yeah. And I love tennis, so that's part of it too.
I hear it's Trent Reznor who did the soundtrack, right? It's supposed to be awesome.
The soundtrack.
You got to see it in the theaters.
Rules. The soundtrack, like the main theme, I'd put it up there with X-Men 97.
Wow.
Dare you.
Well, too bad I'm never going to see a movie in the theaters again for about 15 years because I pay $150 tax now to go see movies.
I
It's
told
an
you
illusion
this.
to my child, by the way.
I want to see Challengers, but I also am at an age, and maybe it's also because my kids are at an age, and Zendaya is obviously beautiful and sexy, but when I see her in sex scenes, I'm like, but no.
Disney.
Yeah, I'm like, but
you didn't
no.
watch Euphoria. That immunized me to that.
Yeah.
That immunized me to a lot of things.
I quit.
It's too much.
I was watching Euphoria and I was like, nah, I ain't gonna be able to do this. Not every episode.
Ryan Clark had the same experience. His kid was in high school at the time,
Yeah.
and he was like, I can't watch this.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just not enjoying it. It's not fun. But yeah, shout out to Challenge. I hope it's good. Zendaya, keep doing your thing, young lady.
All right, well, that'll be it for this week. This episode is going to be on ESPN2 on Wednesdays now. You can also watch the entire thing on youtube.com/@MinaKimes. Thank you, as always, to the fine folks at Omaha Productions for producing the show. Kirsten Sebecki, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Anthony Jimenez, and special treat this week to be filming this at the studio of longtime former friend of the Morning Roast, which was Domonique, Clinton, and I's radio show from 2017. Feels longer ago. Oscar
Zabayos and Podville,
whose full name I definitely knew.